Thanks for joining us. And today we're going to talk about Kriya Yoga and the spiritual ego.
I just want to take a moment to tell you about the Kriya Yoga Initiation Retreat that is happening on February the 7th to 9th, 2025. During this retreat, you can receive initiation into the original Kriya Yoga of Lahiri Baba, Lahiri Mahashai, as taught in the Panchananvadacharya lineage. You'll learn all of the techniques of the first chapter or first initiation of Kriya, which allows students to experience pratyahara, internalization, dharana, internalized concentration, dhyan, the absorption, and samadhi, superconscious awareness. Students will receive detailed instruction in the techniques, participate in guided meditations, receive one-on-one coaching from an instructor, learn about the theory and history of Kriya Yoga, and engage in group Q&A sessions. Registration is limited to 24 participants, so sign up before the retreat sells out. And you can see a link to the sign up on Eventbrite in the description below of this video.
So the first step to awakening in any spiritual path is normally the realization that one's thoughts and feelings do not constitute a true self. And this can come about because of the general dissatisfaction in one's life and the intuitive recognition that there is more to life than the mundane. And if one is involved in some sort of meditation activity, some sort of spiritual path, one may start to have finer perceptions that start to appear in one's meditation. And this can be of great relief when one shifts away from states of dissatisfaction to feeling this wholesome state that arises in meditation, the finer perceptions that start to unfold. And certainly we see this in Kriya Yoga when people start to do Kriya Yoga and associated practices and start to get into an internalized state, start to get into pratyahara, and start to move into the different meditative states of absorption, what we call the jhanas. And some of these experiences, some of these intuitive inner perceptions are very blissful. So this feeling of bliss can start to evolve in one's consciousness. And this is a far cry from the dissatisfaction of everyday life. And it can lead a practitioner to erroneously conclude that this is indeed the true self. This is happiness. This is where I want to be. And as a result, the practitioner can start to identify with that state, to see that as the true self, as the Atman, the soul. And certainly in Kriya Yoga, we mimic the process of starting to go into deeper and deeper states of meditation, as have been outlined by Patanjali. So once we engage in Kriya Pranayama, this form of intentional breathing that brings us into a low idle state, we start to get into pratyahara, into sense internalization or sense withdrawal. And from there, we can start to go into an internalized concentration, what is called dharana, concentration on an internalized void. And from there, we can start to go into an absorbed state, what is called dhyan, where we start to have inner experiences. And these inner experiences can become all-encompassing. So we start to have an experience of samadhi, of the superconscious awareness. And so as we are in these exalted states and we start to really enjoy them, we may start to identify with these particular states, to see them as a me. The true me is this blissful experience in meditation, and start to possibly interact with some of those beings in those finer realms. And so one may become very attached to one's practice and start to really crave to get into those states and to identify with them and see that as one's true nature. And when we're moving away from a dissatisfied mindset to a satisfied mindset, from the unwholesome to the wholesome, as exemplified in our meditative experience, this is a wholesome transition. But the challenge is if we start to identify with these states and start to build an identity around it, we start to create a spiritual ego. This is another form of ahamkara, I-making. We're creating a sense of self from an experience that is not the self. If one becomes too attached to the spiritual ego, to this identification with inner states, one delays one's progress. So the experience of these blissful realms are really intermediary development on the spiritual path. They're on the road towards awakening. So suppose we're going to go on a journey and we want to go on a road trip to our favorite city. And along the way, we have a very nice journey. We see all sorts of wonderful things. But as we're traveling, perhaps we come upon a bridge that has a beautiful view of the valley below. And we stop the car and we get out and we take a look at that beautiful valley and we bask in that beautiful natural radiance. And we appreciate that beauty of nature, knowing that it is part of our journey. And then we get back in the car and we drive towards our destination. However, if we never get back in the car, and perhaps as we're looking over at this beautiful vista, we're enchanted by the natural beauty and we want to remain there forever. But if we stay there for too long, things start to change. The day starts to progress. The sun starts to go down. Before we know it, it is night. We're hungry. We are cold. We need shelter and so on. So the conditions have changed. And we just stay there to look at that wonderful vista. We will have never arrived at our destination. In this case, if we get waylaid into blissful states and identify with them, we never progress beyond them. Similarly, when one starts to move into those blissful states and stays in there for too long, one recognizes that it isn't ultimately satisfying, that things are always changing, that it is not perpetual, that is not permanent, that does not provide lasting satisfaction. And if we go into these blissful states of awareness and we start to build an identification with them, we're really delaying ourselves from progressing on the spiritual path. What we really need to do is to recognize the three characteristics of all phenomena. One is that they are impermanent, they arise and they pass away. Two is that they do not provide lasting satisfaction. And three is that they're impersonal and they cannot be taken as a true self. We let go of our attachment to those experiences and start to lose the grip on our spiritual ego, and things start to change naturally. The meditation starts to unfold naturally, and we start to move towards awakening, which is really about letting go of attachment to all phenomena as one starts to go through finer and finer realms in meditation, until the point where one becomes disenchanted with all phenomenal experiences in meditation and then becomes dispassionate towards them. The mind does not crave for anything that's transitory. And if one is able to abandon this last sense of conceit, one may experience contact with the unconditioned absolute. And then one experiences the realization into one's true nature. And this constitutes the first stage of awakening. So there is a difference between two different perspectives on the spiritual path. One is experience-based, and that is where one judges one's spiritual progression in terms of the experiences that one has. For example, samadhi. Has somebody had a samadhi experience? And that as being a sign that they are somehow developed. The other perspective is a paradigm shift. Is there something that changes the way that one looks at everyday life? To quote exalted Sanskrit scholar practitioner Christopher Wallace, "You see the wordless underlying truth of reality so clearly you can't unsee it." And when this happens, it changes the default setting of which you view the world. You have gone through a paradigm shift. The world is no longer what it once was because you can't unsee what you have seen. And when this occurs, it normally shatters the image of this acausal, perpetual, separate self, which is the ego. And this paradigm shift is described in many traditions. In Theravada Buddhism, they call it stream entry. In Dzogchen, they call it rigpa. In yoga, they call it vidya, knowledge, which is the opposite of avidya, ignorance. And as one awakens from the dream of the small self, one starts to see the unity in all creation and starts to work towards one's final awakening. And so there are many practitioners in Kriya Yoga and many other paths that work hard and they get to a certain level of development, but then they build this sense of spiritual ego and help to stabilize it instead of letting go of it and progressing towards their awakening. And so this is a mistake. This is a major pitfall on the spiritual path. The spiritual ego is not a replacement for true awakening. The spiritual ego has a purpose. It helps to inspire us, to uplift our mind, to get us into our practice, but we need to learn to let go of it so that we can tread the true path towards awakening. So if you have any questions about this video, feel free to send me an email at info@modernkriya.com. Also check our website at modernkriya.com and our YouTube channel. So thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time.